Hello and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. Today I have Fabio Napoleoni on the podcast to talk about kind of the creative mindset, his art, kind of how he got to where he is today, and just kind of explore all the moving pieces about what he's doing currently. So Fabio, welcome.
Thank you, Mike, for reaching out and asking me to do this. It's I read what you're about, and I thought this is pretty interesting that somebody would reach out to me in that aspect of how I use art to create a specific emotion and and things like that. I've never had anybody ask me from that point of view about the art and how the branding of it works. So I thought it was interesting, and I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to talk of course, about art, but then there's more to art than just painting pretty pictures at times.
Just so you know kind of how I got there too, is that my background, I have a very similar background to yourself
Mhm.
and even like Ben Olson, in that I was always drawing, painting, cartooning, doing things as a kid. And my path was always to be some kind of a cartoonist. I always wanted to work at Disney,
Mhm.
or, I always watched like the Chuck Jones creations, the cartoons, and I always thought that's what I'm going to do. And when my career started, I think I was on that path at least a little bit, and it quickly transitioned into more creative graphic design, web design. So I took a little bit of a off road there for kind of how I started. But now, as I'm further in my career and created my own
Mhm.
company, I'm trying to bring that stuff back in. So talking with people like yourself and Ben Olson, and kind of unwrapping and unpackaging that creative mindset is, to me, it's actually part of what I do currently, but it's part of what I'm trying to help customers understand, and customers to do for themselves.
Yeah, probably the most common question I get asked by other artists is, how did I get here? How do I get to your success? How do I And it's not an easy road. It's not a 2 or 3 years you pump it into the field. There's a lot of that goes into it. When I first started, man, I first started selling my artwork straight out of high school in 1990, and just for fun. But when I started taking it serious in 99, 2000, what you draw starts out at 100%. And if you want to be successful, then the sad part is the drawing and the creative part sort of dwindles down a little bit to the point where you're probably at a solid 30% all the time. But you realize that, speaking with people and continuously putting your artwork out there and answering emails and replying directly back to people plays a huge role in how you become successful. You can't just throw an image out there and hope that the world sees it. The world's not going to see it if you're not peddling it,
Right.
and I think that's the part that a lot of the newer people don't sort of do. They don't understand. There's more to a .com or throwing it on Etsy or something like that. At the end of the day, you got to have a physical presence for the art to be viewed. I think that carries weight too,
Yeah, and I think that there needs to be a personal uniqueness about it. And
for sure.
I think when you say that to people, they're like, "Well, how do I create something unique?" And it's like, "Well, you don't necessarily seek to create
Hmm.
something unique. It comes from you."
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And yeah, there's a hustle, there's a grind, there's all those pieces of it, but I think you got to look inward. And to me, like, that's what kind of changed my path a little bit,
Mhm.
is because when I first started my career, I was doing a lot of cartooning and
Yep.
drawing, and I was doing what I was on the path, but it was so personal to me that I was in a commercial art field. So the criticisms and the
Yeah.
somewhat of the beatdown that I got at that time, I was like, I don't know if I want to give this away in this
Yeah.
industry. And that's what kind of forced me to pivot a little bit. And in the back of my mind, it's always been something like, I'm going to save it and I'm going to dust it off and I'm going to get back to it,
Yeah.
because that young in my career, not that I couldn't take the criticism, but it just seemed like it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to give away,
Yeah.
put it that way.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%, and that's another part to the being, getting your product out and being successful with it. You got to have a little bit of a tough skin and listen to that, and then realize too, I'm like, you know what, I think I have something here. Uh, I'm not going to listen to. I grew up in Maine, so the stuff that I do now for a living that has got me to Orlando and has helped me travel all over the country was not accepted here. I try to send it to multiple galleries, and they're like, this isn't main enough. This isn't what our tourists are looking for. And it makes perfect sense now. Then I was a little, butthurt by it. I'm like, oh, what do you mean? These are really cool characters and they're emotional and people love them on eBay. And but they didn't want anything to do with it. But I think that's another part of it too. You got to find your market. You may think this is your market, but in reality, it could be somewhere so unexpected, and then when it hits you, then it kind of makes sense. That, like, I understand now why these people, me being at Disney, makes perfect sense why. The my characters are loved in California, where that's a completely should be a country on its own. And it's once you realize that aspect, then it shifts your focus towards something that's more positive that you didn't expect, and then it kind of makes you more creative too at the same time.
Yeah, and I think you gotta learn to fish in multiple ponds because
Exactly.
it's a cliche, but birds of a feather flock together,
Mhm.
and if you've got a niche and you've got something unique, you only have to find really that first one, and one will lead to 2, and 2 to lead to 4, and
Spot on.
you're off to the races, but you gotta find that one,
Ex-
and
Yeah,
yeah, so if you're truly doing something unique, you just gotta stick with it.
exactly. I did eBay from 2001 to 2000 and I want to say late 2008. And during that time, I experimented with a ton of different styles and everything else. I mean, just trying to find what got me to where I am today. And then my we had a daughter with a heart condition born in 2004. That completely shifted from the socialite art that I was doing with martinis and that sort of that pop art
Yep.
Warhol style, and it just focused on these little goofy little characters. And I was at the same time I was talking to these two other artists that were on eBay. And then as once I signed with a publisher, he took me to that one gallery that said yes, and then another gallery said yes. And I was only in two galleries for about 3 years. And then when people see it and they go to another gallery and say, hey, do you carry his work? Well, then, of course, thankful of the internet, you're able to realize, oh my God, here's this guy and he's in Denver and he's in Orlando. Why is he in these two prominent galleries? Then you get them to ask you. And then they're very fortunate. Two of the artists that I used to speak with often on eBay are also in Pop Gallery in Orlando. So it was kind of weird how we all went, put in our almost a decade of selling online, and then now we're both on Disney. All three of us are on Disney property, successful in our own little circles.
Yeah.
It's kind of a neat thing to see.
Let's unpackage that just a little
Yeah.
bit because 2018 is kind of when it launched for you officially,
Um,
would you say?
no, it's I started with a publisher in the fall of 2008. And
2000.
that yeah, and he I was in Las Vegas with my wife for our 10th anniversary, and I happened to see it's not there anymore, the Jack Solomon Gallery at the Venetian. And I was just blown away because I got to see Tom Everhart and Snoopy, and I was like, "This is amazing. This is what I want my career to be." At that time, I had just quit my 7-year job. I told my wife, "I think I want to make this art thing work." And my wife was like, okay. And the best wife on the planet, never questioned anything. She was like, okay, we'll give it a try. So I did. Publishers started calling me. I signed with them. And in that 6 years that I was with my publisher, you have that one individual that goes out and basically promotes you nonstop, traveling from one gallery. Plus, they all have connections in the art business, so they've either worked or know someone, and they get your artwork in front of them. But at the end of the day, it's you have to be a personable person. You have to be liked. You have to be willing to shake hands and awkward hugs to people who just love your artwork, and then you treat the consultants good because they're the ones that are selling the artwork for you because you can't be there all the time. And that's how it all started, little by little by little. And again, the physical actually hanging on the wall, and the consultants and the internet too just helps greatly.
Yeah. Yeah, forgive me, it was 2008, I had 2018 in my
Yeah.
notes for some reason, but I like what you talked about there about as far as, like, the personable side of
Mhm.
it, because as an artist, I know when I first started out, I don't know what I thought, but I kind of felt like I would create the art and people would just find me and it would just work itself out.
Yeah.
I didn't really I mean, at that point in my life, I didn't really understand that there was a business, a
Yeah.
hustle, a sales component to it, and to your point, yeah, you gotta be someone of substance behind the canvas, so to speak,
Yeah.
so that people get it and they wanna follow and own your art, right?
It's a funny mix of things. I mean, like I said before, I've been asked, what's the magical ingredient? I couldn't tell you. What's successful for me is not successful. Might not work for Ben or like Gabe Leonard, for instance. I don't know if you're familiar with Goddard or Todd White. We are all successful. It's sort of in the same bubble, but the way we got there might be a little different. But at the same time, we all have something in common, where we sit behind a table or we walk through a room and we shake hands and talk and listen and share stories and not always explain the artwork. You have to be that person who's there. The old days of the artist just sitting in the corner and not, just letting someone else explain what the art is about. I always found humorous because they're like, oh, this tree and the shape of it means this. And the artist was thinking, like, no, that is not what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I was probably watching SpongeBob and I thought, oh my God, this would be a great idea. And I
yeah.
think people enjoy listening to that rather than a consultant's point of view on something. If you can hear it directly from the artist, then that's an experience for you and an experience for them. And then there's a better understanding of what you just created.
Yeah, I think the secret sauce when it comes to art, creative, graphic art, whatever it is that it's a collection of moments in your life where you remembered something, you captured something, and every one of those ingredients
Hmm.
kinda goes a soup, and then what comes out the other side is completely unique to that individual, so it's almost impossible to replicate it to some degree because, like, even when I was prepping for this podcast, I had read the information about
Hmm.
how you suffered from asthma as a kid, and you couldn't necessarily be out there doing what everybody else did,
Hmm.
check that box, that's a moment that probably changed you.
Yeah.
Then you talked about, when you went to the hospital and the heart
Hmm.
consultant thing, like that too is probably a milestone that changed you, and every one of those things kinda made you who you are, led you to a place, and then I love the crescendo of it when you created Savino.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, I
uh
mean,
yeah, it's fun. My mother, single parent my entire life. And so she raised myself, my brother, and then a good friend of mine that was having troubles at home. So, and she's maybe probably that's my French bulldog over there trying to dig through the hardwood floor.
yeah,
But
no problem.
um, but she always very supportive. Whatever we wanted to do, she just worked and it encouraged it all the time. So there was no when I said I wanted to go to art school or wanted to do things in music, and which that was my goal. My goal was never to do this art thing ever. Was to become some sort of a music producer. I enjoyed it. I worked at a couple of clubs. We did with DJs where they used to have the real records back in the early '90s. So that's where that nostalgia vibe comes into a lot of my work with music. But she encouraged it all. She just never said you should get a real job. This is never going to work out for you. She just encouraged it. So we always, when it came to understanding how you got to be to where I am today, I think back on my life and I'm like, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I wish I would have done this. Or, and I always say, I wish I wouldn't have goofed off in school and got better grades. But if I would have done that, then I probably would have left the small town I lived in, probably would have never done made the mistakes I made, experienced the things I experienced, which then led me to my wife, and then and then led to
Yeah,
my son and our daughter. And it's just really weird when you think back and you want to change something, But if you made that minor change, where would you, you could be in a completely different path. I might not even be an artist today. I could be working, doing something else. And you have to be, I think you have to accept where you are in your life, and try to find you've been led here. Some, things, the choices you've made in life
Yeah.
led you here.
Yeah, they have created a unique perspective for you that if one of those variables
Yeah,
might have changed or had changed, might not have been the
for
same.
sure. For sure.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you manage kind of the passion for it. I mean, you're obviously doing something that hits pretty close to home to
Mhm,
you. You're obviously making a business out of it now. It's your
mhm.
career. You're getting asked to do different styles or commissions of certain artwork. Like, how do you kind of maintain the center of what your passion is and how you got there?
Well, it's not easy, and I've noticed that. Like I said, I had a publisher for 6 years, which he took a majority of the weight from that. So, the publishing aspect, the printing, dealing with galleries on that level, which I never knew. So that's where I was able to draw and paint, and literally 90% of the time, 10% I was on promoting myself on either Instagram or Facebook with the little like a fan page we started, man, like 13 years ago. And that was really easy. But then in 2015, the publisher, as I started to learn the art industry a little bit more, and having conversations with owners and having conversations with the consultants and what works and what doesn't work, I was very fortunate to have other people in the business that would give me little advice, and these are people that I've been in it for a long, long time. And I started like, you know what, I think I can do this on my own. My publisher and I were not, we're sort of butting heads on where I wanted the artwork to go, because it's very heartfelt, and he just had a different direction that I felt was steering away from what I had created, what the original concept for the art was to evoke an emotion, to get you thinking. It's, I know it's a puppet and a little lion and an elephant, but it is about nostalgia. It's about bringing something, making you realize, I'm like, oh, this is me. I'm this puppet. So now, I'm publishing, printing. My son works with me. He helps me in the studio a little bit while he's going to college. But I probably, that's where I get down to about the 30% of the painting. And it's a daily thing to get on and put a post on Instagram, put a post on, on Facebook, and it's all me. I don't have anybody else do it, simply because the question people always ask me is it really you that's answering me back? And when they know that it's me, it just it there's a I know, listen, if I emailed George Clooney and he got back to me and I knew it was George Clooney, that would make my day. And I think it's really cool to sometimes just set aside the art business and just chat with a complete stranger that just adores your work and wants to know what the light bulb with the wings means. And I think
Yeah.
that's where you open that up for people to just feel like you're the guy next door that's they're buying art from. And and it works both ways. It's like I get something from that too.
Yeah, there's definitely I'm going to overuse the word probably in this episode, but there's an authenticity to it that makes the art more endearing, knowing that you're accessible.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and at the beginning of my career, that was a huge problem. Um, Galleries and publishers don't want the artist talking to the collector. They don't want to. They only want them to tell. The gallery and the publisher want to tell your story the way they want to tell it. And that was something that didn't never sat well with me. It didn't. I'm like, you're saying things that are not true, and my daughter's perfectly fine. She has had her heart issues, yes, but she's not, super ill. And yes, I do have asthma, but I occasionally have my little fits here and there. But it's, and that stuff like that bothered me. And I thought, being genuine and upfront was far better than some far-fetched story of how I got to where I am today.
Yeah, I would say from a creative brand experience, it it adds to the experience of your art, knowing that, maybe what I'm getting from you
Mhm.
on a YouTube video or whatever it is, maybe I'm not getting anything that's mind blowing, but to hear it come from you and in
Mhm.
your words just adds value to the experience. It makes it more enriching, really. I
Yeah.
mean, I'd interviewed Ben Olson here a couple weeks ago for the podcast
Mhm.
as well, and again, like, to hear it from him
Yeah.
makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah. Ben's a cool guy. We got introduced last year during a Chuck Jones event. Well, Comic Con obviously, was shut down due to COVID. And I knew that Ben had been doing interviews with a bunch of other artists, and for years, I've had people ask me like, "Have you met Ben Olsen? Have you guys will get along? He's kind of wacky and blah blah blah, and you guys should do it." And then finally, it just happened, and that first. It was supposed to go in like an hour, and it ended up going over 2 hours. And afterwards, I had people reach out to me and text me, and they're like, "That was the funniest thing I had ever seen." And then we did it one more time after that for like the Chuck Jones family gathering, and it was the same thing. People are like, because we're sort of a little bit unfiltered at times, and I think that's the part where people, it's not always promoting and selling, and that's another key element too that I try to pass on to having my own gallery now. It's you don't always have to be on sell mode. You can, it's perfectly fine to have someone come in and just walk around the gallery.
Yeah,
Talk to them, let them enjoy the work, and if they have a question, ask them. But don't be, this is this, and if you want it now, we can give you a discount. It just doesn't. That puts me off. You know what I mean? And it puts me off when I go into a gallery. I just want to learn about the artwork. You don't have to work hard to sell it to me. The artwork will sell itself.
right.
And I think that's the part where the artists and the gallery really come together and work as one, opposed to just constantly promoting something, because it's not like it's a vase full of flowers. It's a character that's supposed to a sort of attach to you emotionally, pull on your heartstrings, and if you let the collector feel that, then they'll know when it's the right one.
One of the things I find interesting about your work, and it actually plays well into kind of how I view things too, is I love doing things off script. I mean, there's a part of my business that's well strategized
Mhm.
and it's according to a plan, and but there are days where it's like, I don't care if this fits or not. I'm just gonna do this
Yeah.
thing in whatever way I want to do it. And if it doesn't land, it doesn't land. But selfishly, I'm just gonna do some of
Yeah.
that. And when I was looking through kind of your artwork, like, I noticed a bunch of like pop culture stuff that looked very personal: the Huckleberry Hound,
Yeah.
Superman,
Yeah.
the Star Wars, Indiana Jones stuff. So talk to me a little bit about going off script sometimes and just doing stuff for you.
Yeah, well, again, it goes to when I left my publisher. I'll be honest with you, man. I had a 9-year contract with them, and I left after 6. So the way it works is, you have to pay them for those 3 years. I told my wife that was the goal, so we did it. And the reason we did it is partially to what you're saying too. There are certain things I wanted to do, and it got to the point where this is the character that sells. This is the character you're going to paint. Your agreement says 7 of these characters a month. This is what we want. Now I have probably 24 characters that I work continuously, and then I felt sort of like I was in a production line, and I just wanted to just work on the little telephone that we grew up with, or the 50s style televisions, and the Walkmans and the record players, and I wanted to throw all of these nostalgic things that meant things to me. I wanted to throw them into that mix. So as when I left my publisher, I was able to work on pop culture movies like the Karate Kid or The Fly, or and that was this is what I'm doing, and people were just like, this is amazing. You replace Tom Cruise with
Yep.
with Marcineva or Mr. Bunny Boozehound or any one of these guys, and I just thought, I'm like, this. Let's see how this goes. And now I just do one almost every, like when I do a show, I'll throw one in there. I just did for an event for my show in July, Little Shop of Horrors. So my character is going to be Rick Moranis. So I got him with the little sweater on and the glasses and the pants and the big plant is sitting there grabbing a hold of him, and but I enjoy those things, and it breaks it's not the monotony, but it sort of breaks. It gives me a chance to create something I want to do, and it's even better to find out that people just love the art, love that. How many more people love Weird Science or 16 Candles, and they want to see those sort of my take on them.
I think those mashups are a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
it's probably, even though it's pretty comfortable for you to probably create that stuff,
Mhm.
it's still a problem to be solved. It poses a new challenge. Like, well, how am I going to make that?
Yeah.
Okay. So for you to go through that and actually come out with something that's super recognizable, at least it is for me. Yeah, that's some cool stuff. I love it.
Yeah. It's fun for sure.
This has nothing to do with the podcast whatsoever,
Mhm.
but I was watching some videos and stuff prior to today, and
Yeah.
it's something weird that I do that when you said you did it, I'm like, okay, so I'm not alone here. World War II documentaries, serial killer documentaries. Like, I don't think I have any propensity to be a serial killer, but I love serial killer and World War II documentaries, and
Yeah.
it's something I can play in the background
Uh-huh.
and just work for hours. And for whatever reason, I can hear it and I can absorb it. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting. I don't know what it is, but when you had mentioned that, I'm like, I have to bring that up because I'm not alone in that.
No, no.
In
It's
that.
it's funny because that was for the Sullen guys in California.
Yep.
And I want to say it's John Bales is one of the sort of owners or founders of that. His wife loves the artwork and has multiple pieces. They've been to shows, and he had reached out and said, can I get this piece? So I just send it to him. And that video was done. That was his way. Is like, you get to California, we'll put you in the studio with a couple of guys and we'll film you. So I was like, what do you want me to bring? He's like, bring something you've already finished and just add a little paint to it while they're talking to you. I'm like, okay. So those guys are so cool. And and they treated my daughter so well. They put her in the green room. They gave her snacks, great big TV. They let her, she was just in there. But those guys, they got me so comfortable that I was just like, what do you do in the middle of the night? What do you watch? And like the camera's here, but they're sitting just to the side. And I'm thinking, like, oh, they're not behind it. We're just having a talk here. And then we went off on a complete off left field. And then when they sent me the video, I was like, 16 minutes. I'm like, what did you do for six? What did I do? For 16 minutes. And then when I started watching it, the gentleman that I work with said, "Is there any way that I can get a version where it's edited and it doesn't talk about the serial killers at the end?" And I was like, "It doesn't make a difference because these guys are putting it on their side anyway." But I do enjoy that stuff, and I don't know what it is. I like to be educated on sort of how the mind thinks sometimes, and sometimes how you just can't help yourself and the things that people do. But I'm also fascinated about the guys who chase them down, the police officers who we know who craft
Right.
everything. That to me is fascinating as well. And World War II is just, I have a ton of memorabilia that I have stored away, and I'll just end up that my kids have it. But there's something about that too. Young men going off to war to fight, fascism. That just blows my mind because I don't. It's a hard thing, for the country be attacked, and for what does a kid lie about his age, so he can go and fight for his country and know that he might not come back. And it's I don't know, it makes like I could just sit there and just think about that, for a
Yeah.
long time.
And that's what it is for me too. Yeah. I was gonna say that's what it is for me too, is the fascination of how the mind works and how
Mhm.
these people think. But then it's the time and the place in which it occurred too.
Yeah.
Like, you watch some of those, documentaries about World War II or even the serial killer stuff, and it's like this was going on in a time and place when DNA wasn't a thing, the internet wasn't a thing. it was a wild west of, like, people could pretty much do whatever they wanted, and it maybe didn't feel like that at the time, but now historically, you look back at what some of these people got away with, or even how they influenced others through,
Exactly.
even like,
Newspapers, reading the
yeah,
newspapers, and you're like, oh, this person did this, and then it might, someone who might have been thinking they could get away with it. There's a spark. This guy's getting away with it. So then, there's multiple shows where there are serial killers all through the country, and at the end of the day, they're probably all reading the paper, the news, the headlines, and then. But today, with your phones and everything else, and it's mind blowing to me that you get people that chat on these things and they're like, I don't know how I got caught. Really?
right, yeah,
My,
really,
back then they wrote letters, the FBI literally had to track down a letter. Here they're like, hey, and I know where your IP address is. You're in the middle of Maine, about 90 miles north of Bangor, and you're like, but it's soldiers and then the veterans and coming back and what we know today as PTSD, shell shock or things like that. You just think back and how many those guys came back and lived a long life or didn't, dealing with that. Like Stand By Me is a great movie that shows the not is it Gordy? Not Gordy. LaChance, the kid,
yep,
not Chance either. Corey Feldman, the kid with the glasses.
oh, yep, yep,
How his father was abusive to him, and then you come to find out later in the movie that his father had suffered some traumatic, things during World War II, and that's why he was the way he was. And but it's a funny thing, crazy.
yeah, the history behind all that stuff is pretty fascinating, but when I heard you mention it, I was like, "Oh, man, I gotta bring that up because that's pretty cool."
Yeah.
Yeah. So my last question, and I'll be honest, there's a part of this is that I think it's applicable to people in my industry and maybe even in yours. But also selfishly, I am kind of in this place where what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to dust off the chops and get back into it? Like, I know there's the path to get to where you are is that's a totally different thing. But I meet a lot of artists and a lot of creatives that maybe stepped off the path or they abandoned their true dream of, hey, I want to work at Disney or I want to draw cartoons for whatever. And they opted to go a different direction. And they always, I think as artists, we always want to come back to that. What advice would you give to somebody to get back at it and to kind of get back to where they left off?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's for me, if I were to start doing it today, I probably would sort of do the little things that other people did for me. Like I created sort of a fan page. I didn't create the fan page. A fan actually created the fan page for me because at the time I was like, why would I want a fan page? That sounds so and
Yeah.
they did it anyway. And I started out with like 13 people or whatever. But you and they again, it's word of mouth. One person invites another. So I would start with something like that, and I would throw out little, hey, this is my portfolio. I'm self-representing, self-printing, you be dealing with me directly instead of a publisher. And I think the atmosphere now is better than it was, 20, even when I just say 13 years ago when I got in. I see that the amount of publishers that were then to what they are now, like Ruth Ann
Right.
Thorne at Crown Publishing, stellar. Daniel Crosby at Limelight, stellar human beings, but they don't do business the way you traditionally do. So you could shoot out to those guys. That's my suggestion is always have a good body of work,
Yeah.
20, 30 pieces, a variety of things and throw it out there. And if nobody bites, there's always, Instagram. You can throw things on there to advertise for yourself. It's relatively cheap. I do that, and I always like to see, I'm usually 67% females to 33% males, and the age,
Yep.
or it breaks down the age brackets that's always something that appeals to me too. The 34 to 44 is the highest bracket. So I'm thinking like, oh, what, like how old was I when these guys were growing up? I think of things like that, and then 44 to like 64, which is more because I'm going to be 49 in a couple more weeks. So I think of that timeline too that helps me create the artwork that makes me feel good, and I know that it does. It's creating some sort of nostalgic vibe for them. But that's I would still use the internet, reach out to people. If you have a local gallery where you are, get your artwork in there, and then you promote the crap out of them through social media. And if they have you on a weekend drawing for people, do that stuff too. That's pretty much how I started, and just sitting at a desk and talking to people. That might be the little formula that should be consistent in how you sell the work. Showing up, being on time. Don't drink too much while you're at shows. And it's always good to not always just sit behind a desk. Get out, walk around. When you see someone staring at your artwork, walk over, ask them if they have any questions, explain to them a little bit the process. And one of the things that I always, from day one, is when someone came to me and brought a print, I would ask them why they bought it. I know they want to know how I created it, which is great, but I want to know why you liked it. Probably 9 out of 10 times, that in itself, their response to me, literally, I stored away my next painting. Like I would get such joy from listening to that response that as soon as they walked away, I have a little pad next to me, and I would write down I literally what they had said to me, which then sparked an idea in my mind off that same image. It's just, or the title, when what they see in the artwork, which is just, it's mind blowing to me. They may have seen something completely different. But
Yeah, that's actually, I was just gonna say, is it's always a nice compliment when they pull something that,
yeah,
I'm not saying it's not there, but they pull something from it that you're like, okay, I never even really picked up on that.
oh yeah, it's that to me is probably, it's rewarding. And I've been told horror stories of artists that people have said that to them, and they're like, no, no, you're wrong. This is what it means. Well, no, you're wrong, because they're buying it because that's what they see in it. With Marcinevo, people have asked me, "Is that you?" Well, you're not. I see you're looking at the piece and you're thinking, "Oh, that's Fabio in this field." You're not thinking that. You're thinking it's you. You're in that field. You're passing over a heart to the person you love, or you may be taking care of a child, or going through this fun emotion of whatever. But that's not me. That's you. He's all of us, and all the characters are. And I think that's where, when I get approached, I like hearing what they see in the artwork, because it's rewarding, and it feeds into what I create all the time. I mean, my desk, like right here on my kitchen table, there's crap everywhere. It's just
Yeah.
and it's just, you find all these funny things that you remember people have said to you for years. And I have a little book of all these little notes, and I go through, and it could be 4 or 5 years old, and it instantly sparks a memory, and I'm like, and then you go from there.
I love that creative process and just hearing it from other people's perspectives, because I think there's similarities in how people get there and how they kind of manage that idea generation and kind of that bank of ideas. But it's interesting to hear somebody's unique perspective on how they extract that from time to time.
No, it
So
is fun. This is a fantastic business to be in, especially, even if you have a second job, and this is what you do, and it pays your bills, or gets, like, for me, this now is my career. But at one point, we would save this money, and my wife and I would go on vacation. So, and even if that's what art is doing for you, you can't really complain, because I mean, it's a fun thing to do, and I enjoy it. It's 21. It'll be 21 years that I've, literally started selling art, and I still enjoy it. I have my moments where, like right now, the house is empty. I'm sitting here, my snoring dogs, and it's just fun.
well, congratulations on your career, because like I said, I learned of you through the Chuck Jones interview you did with Ben, and I'm a fan of your work, so I'm definitely gonna be doing some shopping and seeing what I need to get in my studio. So, well, before I let you go, tell us where we can find more information. I know you have your personal website, plus you have a gallery website, correct?
Yeah, it's just FabioNapoleoni.com, and that site is just, that's mine, and that's basically there just for informational purposes. You can see some of the art, and there is a gallery in the menu. There is a galleries link, and if you hit that link, then from there you just find a gallery that's closest to you. And I think they all have it set up. They all have a direct link to that gallery, so you don't have to go back out and Google them or whatever. There's a direct link. And then, yeah, there's my own gallery in Laguna. I'll be there July 31st for technically our grand opening, which actually happened in October of last year due to the restrictions and everything in California and COVID. We just held off till now to officially do that. And of course on Instagram, at just Fabio Napoleoni, and on Facebook. My personal page is pretty boring. I don't do anything on that. But the Fabio Napoleoni fan club, get in there. It's a private club. And the reason we do that is that I don't, people share pretty personal things. And I think if you want to be a member of the club, then that's the people who should only be, shouldn't be public, for everybody to see what you're sharing on a personal basis. So it's a private club, and you have to, somebody will give you the okay to go in, and you're good to go.
Cool. I'm going to actually share those in the show notes as well, so people can find it. And yeah, with that, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate the time, and it's great to get to know you, and have a good rest of your Monday.
You too, brother. Take care.